2 days before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, my mother-in-law showed up, unannounced, with a moving truck, and hauled her boxes straight into my master bedroom. My fiancé not only helped her settle in, but he also expected me to sleep on the couch to accommodate her. The note I left them the next morning changed everything. My name is Olivia. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. Have you ever had a relative treat your home like their own? I stepped into my penthouse, the floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of Central Park that had cost me $15 million in cold, hard cash. My brain was still humming with the closing arguments of a $50 million real estate litigation, and all I wanted was the sanctuary of my master suite. Instead, the hallway was a minefield of cardboard and misplaced entitlement. I reached the doorway and stopped. Vanessa, my 64-year-old mother-in-law, was inside my walk-in closet. She was not just unpacking, she was systematically purging. I watched as she took a stack of my confidential case files, documents worth months of billable hours, and tossed them onto the floor like they were old newspapers. She replaced them with a row of vintage velvet hats. She did not even look up when I cleared my throat. She just pointed a manicured finger at the shelving. "You have far too much clutter in here, Olivia," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of practiced condescension that usually costs people their jobs in my world. "I am moving my seasonal wardrobe into this section. You should really tell your housekeeper to be more thorough. There was dust on the top rack." I stared at her, my forensic mind already calculating the breach of protocol. "You are throwing my litigation files onto the floor," I said, my voice dangerously level. Vanessa waved a hand as if swatting away a minor annoyance. "It is our house now, Olivia. Trevor lives here, and in 48 hours, you will be his wife. Family shares. Besides, I am in the middle of a housing crisis. I need to be comfortable." Trevor hurried into the room, sweating through his designer shirt. He did not look at the mess on the floor. He looked at me with that pleading, pathetic expression he used whenever he wanted to bypass a boundary. "Come on, babe," he mumbled. "Don't make a scene. Mom's landlord was a nightmare, and she is really fragile right now. Maybe we should put your things in the guest suite, Trevor," I suggested. "It has its own bath." "Absolutely not," Vanessa snapped, bracing her hands on her hips. "The guest bed is a queen. You know I have chronic back issues, Trevor. I need the lumbar support of a king-size mattress." My chiropractor was very specific. She turned to me, her eyes cold and calculating. "You and Trevor are young. You are resilient. You can take the guest room, or better yet, just sleep on the sectional sofa in the living room tonight. You just sit behind a desk and talk for a living, but Trevor and I have been hauling boxes all day. He needs his rest for the wedding rehearsal tomorrow." I looked at the man I was supposed to marry. I waited for him to remind her whose name was on the deed. I waited for him to tell her that my home was not a communal asset for her to colonize. Instead, he just rubbed the back of his neck. "Be flexible, Olivia," he said. "Just for a few nights. Have a little heart." I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not even ask why. Most people would see my silence as a breakdown, a sign of learned helplessness in the face of a prison without bars. But they were misreading the data. In my profession, silence is not a surrender. It is a collection phase. This was not a family dispute. It was a hostile takeover attempt. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and they were finally hitting the limit. I realized then that I had been the silent investor in their version of family, and it was time to check the ledger. "Okay," I said, offering a slow, clinical smile that did not reach my eyes. "Take the bed, Vanessa. Make yourself at home. I have some late-night work to catch up on anyway." I picked up my scattered files, retrieved my laptop, and walked toward my office. Trevor let out a sigh of relief, thinking he had successfully managed me. He had no idea that I was not going to the sofa to sleep. I was going to my command center to initiate an audit. The heavy oak door of my office clicked shut, sealing me inside my command center. The room was soundproof, a feature I had insisted on to ensure absolute silence for my complex litigations. I did not bother turning on the overhead lights. The glow from my triple monitor setup illuminated the space in a cold blue hue. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, cracked my knuckles, and woke up the servers. Trevor thought I was a resilient workhorse. He was about to find out exactly what happens when that workhorse stops pulling the carriage and starts tracking the trail of oats. My firm utilized proprietary financial tracking software, the kind that interfaces directly with public records and global registries. To the average person, hiding a financial disaster might seem possible. To me, a digital paper trail is as visible as glowing footprints in fresh snow. Last year, Trevor had handed over his laptop and passwords, begging me to help with his tax filings because the forms confused him. That single act of laziness had given me everything I needed. I opened an encrypted file and typed in his name, followed by Vanessa's. I decided to start with her housing crisis. Trevor had spun a story about a ruthless landlord suddenly terminating her lease in a luxury high-rise. That narrative was professionally insulting. In New York, tenant rights are robust. You do not just get tossed onto the street on a Friday morning without months of documented legal cause. I tapped into the public property records for her downtown address. The results populated instantly, and I let out a dry, humorless breath. Vanessa did not rent that condominium. She had owned it. Or rather, she had owned it until the bank seized it. I pulled up the court dockets and sifted through the foreclosure filings. She had not paid her mortgage in 14 months. Yesterday was not a sudden tragedy. It was the scheduled, legally mandated lockout date executed by the county sheriff. But where had her money gone? She bragged constantly about her early retirement and her stock portfolio. I dug deeper, accessing civil court records and lien registries. The truth was far from glamorous. There was no portfolio. There were only massive, crippling debts. The records showed multiple liens filed by a prominent casino resort corporation. Vanessa was a severe gambling addict who had, quite literally, bet her entire life away at the blackjack tables. I sat back, the blue light washing over my face. Trevor knew his mother was being evicted by the sheriff, yet he orchestrated this circus to make her look like a victim, manipulating me into letting a chronic gambler into my home. But a nagging question remained. Trevor made a decent salary as a property manager. Why had he not simply paid off her arrears? I toggled over to Trevor's financial profile. His balance was shockingly low. He was living paycheck to paycheck, spending entirely on luxury car leases and custom suits to maintain his wealthy facade. He had no liquid savings to bail her out. So, how was he financing this emergency move? I initiated a comprehensive hard pull on my own credit report. I am meticulous about my finances, but with the wedding planning, I had not looked in 2 months. I stared at the screen, my breathing stopping completely. There were 2 new accounts listed under my name. 2 platinum tier credit cards with $50,000 limits each. Both had been opened exactly 6 weeks ago. Both were maxed out. The billing address was a private post office box in Trevor's name. He had systematically disabled my bank's push notifications and redirected all credit alerts to a hidden folder in my email junk. He didn't just use my SSN. He had exploited the access I gave him to my business EIN during tax season, creating a spoofed secondary profile that bypassed my personal credit freeze. It was a calculated breach of my professional firewall, but the social security number used was mine. Trevor had stolen my identity. The man I was scheduled to marry in less than 48 hours had committed federal identity theft to pay off $30,000 of Vanessa's casino markers. and buy her a new wardrobe. He was funding his hero complex and her addiction using my life's work. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. This was not revenge. It was accounting. I began downloading every transaction timestamp and internet protocol address log. Trevor and Vanessa were sleeping soundly upstairs in my master bedroom, entirely confident that they had won. They thought they had secured a lifetime of luxury financed by a silent wife. They were about to learn that you never, ever steal from a woman who destroys financial criminals for a living. Saturday morning arrived with the smell of expensive espresso and the sound of my master bedroom's door clicking open. Trevor and Vanessa were already seated at the marble kitchen island, enjoying a $200 catered breakfast. They looked rested, having slept in my king-size bed while I spent the night under the cold blue light of my office monitors. Vanessa was wearing one of my silk robes, a piece of clothing she had no right to touch. She looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my Navy litigation suit. "Dress like a wife, Olivia, not a workhorse," she said, before taking a slow sip of her latte. "A woman in your position should focus more on her husband's comfort and less on billable hours." Trevor slid a thick document across the marble countertop. He did not look me in the eye. "Babe, we need you to sign this before the rehearsal lunch," he said, his voice rehearsed and slick. "It is just a standard wedding insurance waiver for the venue. Since the penthouse is such a high-value asset, they need a signature to finalize the liability coverage." I did not reach for the pen. I picked up the document instead. My forensic eye did not see insurance terminology. It saw a predatory trap. I didn't flinch. I needed them to confirm their fraudulent intent on the hidden security cameras I had synced to my cloud server just an hour ago. This wasn't a moment of vulnerability. It was the final deposition. The title page was indeed a waiver, but the following 20 pages were a masterpiece of legal deception. This was a modified post-nuptial transfer agreement. It explicitly stated that, upon execution, I would irrevocably transfer 50% ownership of my law firm and 50% equity of my Manhattan penthouse directly to Trevor. It bypassed all standard legal waiting periods. "A wedding insurance waiver?" I asked, my voice as level as a balanced ledger. "Exactly," Vanessa chimed in, her smile widening into something predatory. "We are just protecting our collective future. You are always talking about risk management, aren't you? Think of this as the ultimate safety net for our family." "And if I do not sign this safety net?" I inquired. Trevor's charming facade slipped, replaced by the sharp edges of a man who realized his mark was looking too closely. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a low, threatening register. "Don't be difficult, Olivia. You have been acting erratic lately. If you cancel this wedding or refuse to cooperate, I will be forced to tell your managing partners and the executive committee that you are suffering from a mental breakdown. I have the recordings of you talking to yourself in your office all night. A law firm like yours cannot survive a lead partner with a questionable psychological state." I looked at the two of them. They were not just parasites anymore. They were industrial spies. They viewed my life, my firm, and my home as a hostile takeover target. And they were using my own professional reputation as the leverage. I felt a strange sense of clarity. Anger was not loud, it was clinical. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown, it was a balance sheet. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, and they had just shown me that their debt was unrecoverable. "You are absolutely right," I said, offering that same slow, chilling smile. I picked up the pen and held it poised over the signature line. They both leaned in, greed radiating from them like heat. "I will take it into my office to witness it properly. I will meet you at the rehearsal." I walked away without looking back. They thought they had finally subdued me. They thought they were securing their luxurious retirement. In reality, they had just confirmed that the only thing left to do was initiate the final, unmitigated destruction. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I never used outside of standard business hours. Harrison did not answer on the first ring. He was 55 years old, a veteran of New York's most vicious corporate litigation battles, and he valued his sleep above almost anything else. But he also knew that if I called him at this hour, a financial disaster of epic proportions was unfolding, one that required immediate, ruthless intervention. "Olivia," he said, his voice gravelly but instantly alert. "Tell me someone is going to prison." "Actually, Harrison, make it a family reunion in a state facility," I replied, my voice a low, steady whisper. As I stared at the door they thought I was sleeping behind. "We are executing an emergency asset lockdown and a hostile corporate eviction. I need you at your computer right now." I outlined the breach with surgical precision. I told him about the identity theft, $100,000 maxed out across 2 platinum cards Trevor had opened with my stolen social security number. I told him about the fraudulent post-nuptial agreement they had tried to disguise as a wedding waiver. Harrison's response was pure, unfiltered legal malice. "They tried to steal from a litigation shark," Harrison said, letting out a sharp breath of disbelief. "The absolute sheer arrogance of these people is staggering." "All right, Olivia, we are going to burn them to the absolute ground. Where do we start?" "First, we freeze the credit," I instructed, my fingers mirroring his rapid typing. "I am placing a hard, permanent lock on my social security number. No new accounts, no inquiries. I am also filing the fraud disputes for the 2 cards Trevor opened. By the time he tries to buy his next latte, those cards will be dead plastic." "Done," Harrison confirmed. "Next?" "The physical assets," I said, pulling up the digital deed to my penthouse. "We are executing a rapid transfer. I am moving the property from my personal name directly into Titan Property Management." Harrison let out a dark, rich chuckle. "Excellent. We aren't waiting for a new filing. We are activating the irrevocable trust and the transfer on death deed you pre-signed last year for asset protection. I am time-stamping the execution for 2 a.m. Legally, the entity Titan now holds full possessory interest." "Exactly," I said, confirming the legal trap. "Corporate evictions for hostile trespassers do not require 30 days notice. They require a call to the sheriff for immediate removal. I want that notice drafted on your heaviest legal letterhead and delivered to the sheriff by 8 in the morning." Finally, I set the digital bait. I knew Trevor's greedy habits. Once the credit cards declined, he would scramble for leverage. He would try to breach my office to find financial records he could hold hostage. I established a digital honeypot, a decoy account established to track cybercrimes, and left a trail of unencrypted breadcrumbs on the home network. The financial fortress was sealed. The legal weapons were loaded, primed, and aimed directly at the people sleeping in my bed. I felt no exhaustion, only a sharp, crystalline energy. I was not just Olivia the bride anymore. I was the architect of a spectacular, unmitigated destruction. I did not stop with the property transfer. In my world, you do not just secure the perimeter. You inventory the vault. While Trevor and Vanessa were busy arguing in the kitchen over which vintage hat looked best on the marble counter, I slipped back into my bedroom. I walked straight to my vanity, to the small, velvet-lined box where I kept the only piece of my grandmother I had left. It was a 4-carat emerald-cut diamond ring, valued at $40,000. It was more than jewelry. It was my inheritance, a symbol of a woman who had built her own life from nothing. I opened the box, and for the first time that night, my heart actually stuttered. The stone was there, but the light was wrong. It did not have the deep, prismatic fire of a real diamond. I picked it up, feeling the weight. It was too light, too perfect. I reached into my bag for my jeweler's loop, a tool I often use to verify physical assets during corporate audits. I peered through the glass, and the truth hit me with the force of a gavel. The serial number etched on the girdle was gone. The inclusions I knew by heart were missing. Vanessa had not just moved in, she had performed a surgical swap. She had pawned a $40,000 piece of my history and replaced it with a $20 cubic zirconia. She hadn't gone to a reputable jeweler. She had traded it to a high-stakes casino bookie to cover a weekend of bad bets, knowing that once we were married, the insurance would cover her tracks. This was not just a family disagreement anymore. This was a criminal heist. I realized then that the urgency behind the predatory post-nuptial agreement was not just about greed. It was about covering the tracks of a systematic theft. They did not just want my future, they were already erasing my past. My compassion had not been a bridge. It had been an open door for a pair of high-stakes thieves. But the real kill shot came when I returned to my office and checked the logs on the digital honeypot I had set. The decoy folder I had labeled confidential litigation files had not just been accessed, it had been copied and sent to an external server. I traced the internet protocol address of the recipient. It did not belong to a personal account. It belonged to the lead partner of the rival firm I was currently fighting in the $50 million real estate merger. Vanessa had not just stolen my jewelry, she had stolen my work. She had sold my confidential strategy and internal evidence to the very people who were trying to defeat me in court. She used an encrypted offshore broker to facilitate the leak, attempting to shield the rival firm from direct liability while ensuring she received an untraceable kickback for my professional ruin. They had pivoted from domestic parasites to industrial spies. The 2 platinum credit cards Trevor opened were just the tip of the iceberg. They were siphoning my equity to pay off her gambling debts while simultaneously selling my professional life to the highest bidder. I sat in the dark, the cold blue light of the monitors reflecting off my eyes. I did not feel rage. I felt a profound clinical detachment. When a criminal moves from theft to espionage, you do not negotiate and you do not wait for an apology. You execute the warrant. Every sacrifice I had made, every 80-hour week, every invisible brick I had laid to build my empire, they had treated it all like a clearance sale. They were not family. They were a liability that needed to be liquidated. I added the forensic logs of the data breach and the high-resolution photos of the counterfeit ring to I realized then that my master suite was not just a bedroom anymore, it was a crime scene. And the perpetrators were currently upstairs, dreaming of the wealth they thought they had already stolen. Before I stepped out, I left a single neon yellow sticky note on the marble island, right next to their empty espresso cups. It simply read, "The audit is complete, your debt is due." I wanted that to be the last thing they saw before the world turned cold. At exactly 12 o'clock, I sat at a quiet cafe 2 blocks away, watching the perimeter of my empire through the high-definition security feed on my tablet. The sun was high over Manhattan, but inside the penthouse, the atmosphere was about to turn freezing. I watched as 2 marked cruisers and a black transport van pulled up to the curb. The sheriff's knock was not a request. It was a rhythmic demand for entry. Trevor opened the door, flashing that same predatory, charming smile he had used to sell me on a life of lies. I could hear his voice through the audio feed, dripping with unearned confidence, as he told the officers there must be a mistake. He actually tried to invite them in for espresso, playing the role of the affluent homeowner. But the sheriff did not move. He held up a thick manila folder, the same one Harrison had filed under the corporate entity Titan Property Management. The folder contained more than just an eviction notice. It held a criminal seizure warrant. Because the premises were now part of an active identity theft and corporate espionage investigation, the sheriff had the authority to clear the site immediately to preserve forensic evidence. I watched Trevor's face through the camera. It was a slow-motion collapse. The arrogant sales director was gone, replaced by a man who suddenly realized he was standing on a floor that no longer belonged to him. Because the penthouse was now a corporate asset, he was not a fiancé being dumped. He was an unauthorized squatter occupying a commercial site. Then Vanessa appeared at the top of the grand staircase. She was still wearing my $2,000 silk robe, a cup of tea in her hand, looking down like a queen surveying a riot. When she heard the word eviction, her facade of suburban elegance disintegrated into something feral. She shrieked that she was a senior citizen, that her son would own this building by sunset, that I was a clinical psychopath who had set them up. As the deputies moved in to execute the forced removal, I used the smart home app on my tablet to initiate the final lockdown. Every high-definition camera and microphone in the penthouse was legally registered under Titan Properties Security Protocol, a standard corporate disclosure for any resident handling sensitive litigation data. Trevor had signed the acknowledgement months ago without reading it, unknowingly consenting to his own recorded downfall. With one tap, I disabled the elevator access codes and locked the master suite doors. I watched Vanessa lunge at a deputy, her manicured nails clawing at his uniform. The response was immediate and clinical. A sharp metallic click echoed through the foyer as the steel handcuffs locked around her wrists. It was a moment of absolute karmic justice. I watched as she was led out of the building she had tried to steal, still wearing my robe, her hair a bird's nest of ruined entitlement. This was the total collapse of an illusory power. For years, she had rented her social status using stolen money and borrowed prestige. She believed that having expensive things made her someone important, but the moment the cash flow stopped, there was nothing left to support the weight of her ego. She was not a high society matriarch. She was a common grifter who had finally run out of other people's pockets. I watched them being loaded into the back of the transport van, their faces pressed against the glass as they looked at the sidewalk where the clean-out crew was unceremoniously dumping the boxes of vintage hats and designer suits. It was the exact mirror of how she had treated my litigation files only 24 hours earlier. The audit was complete. The liability had been liquidated. 1 year has passed since the morning I left that note on the marble island. Tonight, the ballroom is bathed in a golden glow, a stark contrast to the cold blue light of the monitors where I first dismantled my former life. My law firm has tripled in size since then, weaponizing the very sabotage intended to destroy me into a marketing campaign for impenetrable professional ethics. The logistical fallout of a canceled ceremony was handled with the same surgical precision. My executive assistant and a crisis management team had the venue dismantled and the vendors settled within hours of the arrest, ensuring not a single gossiping headline touched my professional reputation. We are no longer just a respected name in New York real estate. We are the apex predators of the financial sector. On my finger, the 4-carat emerald-cut diamond has been restored to its rightful place. It took months of litigation and the seizure of every asset Vanessa had left to recover her counterfeit legacy, but the prismatic fire of my grandmother's strength is finally home. It serves as a silent reminder that a real legacy is built on character, not the random chance of bloodlines. The documentation from my digital audit provided the kill shot in the federal hearing. Trevor did not just lose his fiancée, he lost his identity. He was sentenced to 7 years in a federal penitentiary for aggravated identity theft and wire fraud. His days of custom suits and charming bluffs are gone. Now, he trades his designer wardrobe for a scratchy khaki uniform, spending his hours in the facility laundry room earning exactly 12 cents per hour. His financial ruin is permanent. His wages will be garnished for the rest of his natural life to satisfy the corporate restitution he owes. Vanessa sits in a state facility, stripped of the rented social status she believed made her superior. The king-size mattress she demanded has been replaced by a thin cot, and her walk-in closets are now a single plastic dresser. Her gambling addiction remains unmedicated and unsatisfied, leaving her with nothing but the haunting memory of the wealth she briefly touched and instantly lost. They are both social pariahs, isolated in the squalor of their own making. Watching their absolute destruction has provided the ultimate emotional reward. But standing here tonight, I have come to realize a deeper truth. We are often pressured by society to compromise our hard-earned success for the sake of familial harmony, but I have learned that family is not a blood-bound obligation to endure abuse. It is a partnership of integrity and mutual respect. Sometimes, the greatest liberation is not forgiveness, but the total and irrevocable severance from those who only see you as a resource to be mined. Cutting a toxic tie, even if it is labeled as family, is a necessary act of survival to protect your soul and your sanctuary. I am no longer a silent investor in someone else's delusion. I am the architect of my own peace. My master suite is finally quiet, and I have learned that the best revenge is not destruction. It is becoming everything they said you could not be while you build something beautiful from the ashes. If you find yourself in a situation where your floor is being treated like a doormat for someone else's entitlement, remember that you have the right to set a boundary made of steel. Forgiveness is not always for the other person. Sometimes it is the only way to set yourself free and find the future you truly deserve. If this story empowered you to stand your ground, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.